Hey everyone, this is the third chapter to this story, and we're just going to go ahead and head straight into continuing from the last chapter. When Pete turned 17, things at school became more difficult for him. He was never a popular kid or anything like it, but he'd never had such issues with his classmates before. Sarah, a gorgeous girl in his class, quickly became his best friend. Unfortunately, due to her attractiveness, she was the most popular girl at school. Therefore, all the males were jealous of him since they assumed Pete was her boyfriend. As a result, the youngsters began to dislike him. They had no idea that the two's friendship wasn't concealing any other feelings. They were simply great buddies. Unfortunately, some of these jealous students began bullying Pete at school. They tended to approach him when they caught him alone, calling him names and even pushing him and hitting him. Nonetheless, they were well aware that they may get in trouble because they were at school, so as a result, they always let him go in the end. There was a young man named Max, though. He seemed to be the one who despised Pete the most. He was constantly calling him names and pestering him for no apparent reason. Pete couldn't figure out why he was acting like that. In numerous ways, his behavior surprised him. He knew Max simply detested him, yet, for unknown reasons, Max occasionally just stared at him. During class, sometimes he could feel his cold stare. Other times, it happened during the break. He constantly had a feeling Max was staring at him intently somewhere. Of course, he thought his actions were strange and suspicious. So one day during summer vacation, Pete's grandmother needed certain crucial ingredients for dinner, so she asked her grandson to go to a store in town to purchase them. It was a little late when she asked, but she figured if Pete sprinted, he'd be back shortly. Pete went straight to the store. He prepared to return to the house after obtaining what his grandmother had requested, but he didn't realize that someone was staring at him from a distance. It was Max. He decided to follow Pete as soon as he noticed he was alone. Pete was aware of how late it was, though he moved faster. The sky was also getting darker by the second. He needed to go home as quickly as possible. So, as a result, he decided to take a shortcut, despite the fact that it entailed walking down a deserted alley. As he began to walk inside it, he had a sense of foreboding, as if something horrible was about to happen. But he assumed he was being paranoid and just continued walking. As he moved on, the sky darkened even more. He tried not to think about it until he sensed a presence behind him. He immediately whirled around, surprised to see Max in the dark lane. "What are you doing here?" Pete inquired, visibly disturbed by his presence. The other boy mockingly sneered. "I suppose I should ask you the same question. What's a pretty boy like you doing in such a dangerous place?" Max approached him dangerously as he exclaimed those words. Pete didn't like how Max was staring at him like he were a predator stalking his prey. The boy's actions were definitely out of character for him. Something was strange about him, but Pete had no desire to find out what was going on, so he began to walk. But Max didn't like his gloomy attitude, so he followed him. "Where are you going so fast? Why don't you stop so we can talk for a minute?" he asked. But Pete had no interest in figuring out what the boy wanted to talk about. As an outcome, he turned away. "I'm speaking to you. Did your grandmother forget to teach you proper manners?" Max was not about to give up, so he kept an attentive gaze on him. Pete was becoming concerned. Why was Max talking to him in that tone? He just appeared to be a completely different person. True, he'd never been cordial towards him, but Pete had never seen him act this aggressively before. Pete had no idea what to make of it, but he didn't want to find out what was causing the boy's behavior, so he opted to ignore him once more. Max became enraged when he realized he was being ignored. What on earth was Pete thinking? He wondered. He should be grateful that he was speaking to him at all. So he simply pushed him up against the wall. I told you I was talking to you. Why are you leaving? For a split second, their gazes locked. Pete was plainly terrified. What did Max want? Why was he pushing him so hard? Please let me go. Why are you so upset with me? Is it because you have feelings for Sarah? She's not my girlfriend, you know. Max sneered as soon as he heard those words. This isn't about Sarah, Max mocked as he drew uncomfortably close to the youngster. He was getting close, but what was he trying to accomplish? Pete was perplexed. He could feel Max's breath on him because he was so near, and he continued coming closer. Was he going to kiss him? But that was absurd. What could make Max want to kiss him? Pete's mind went blank when he felt the boy's lips on his. He was, in fact, kissing him. What are you doing? Are you insane? Pete asked as he tried to push Max away, but Max didn't want to hear him. He kept pushing himself closer to him, and then Pete punched him in the face with all his strength. Max almost fell due to the impulse. Of course, he didn't like what Pete did, so he punched back. Pete was not used to physical conflicts. As a result, when Max attacked him, he completely lost his balance. Unfortunately, the floor was extremely slippery. As he was backing away, he tripped on some rocks, which caused him to stumble. He was ready to fall to the ground, so he was terrified. Then, finally, Pete hit his head on the sidewalk. Everything went black for him the moment his head impacted with the pavement. Suddenly, he had no idea what was going on. He was dizzy and his body was failing him. After some time, he gradually began to regain consciousness. He slowly began to recall what had occurred. He remembered getting punched in the face, then he recollected how everything around him vanished and the floor opened up to devour him. Shortly, he noticed a familiar figure in front of his face, but he immediately dismissed it as unreal. As a consequence, he assumed he was dreaming. Vegas materialized in front of him out of nowhere. Vegas was visibly concerned as Pete had never seen him before, but he was still as attractive as ever. I think you don't realize how beautiful you are, Pete said. The statement surprised Vegas. Obviously, no one had ever addressed him as such. Can you tell me what happened to you? Vegas continued asking. Who did this to you? But Pete didn't seem to care. He just stared at the man in front of him as if he was a real angel. That was not expected for Vegas. It doesn't matter. However, you should know how beautiful you are, Pete remarked before passing out again. And that concludes this chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And from what I read, I obviously picked up on a few points that stood out to me. So things like Pete struggling with bullying and jealousy, which is something that he's obviously not used to, and he's visibly confused every single time that happens to him from the other male students. So, oh yeah, and it was mostly due to him being friends with Sarah, which happened to be the most popular girl. And yeah, like previously mentioned, he was a target for bullying from the other students, mainly from Max, who I would definitely assume hated him. I mean, he made him the focus on, he made Pete the focus of his insecurities and decided to take it out on Pete every chance he could get, from antagonizing him, like calling him names, taunting him, and it was always without clear reasons. Maybe Max just enjoyed fucking with Pete. Maybe, and shoot, to my surprise, come to find out, Max had a thing for Pete the entire time. Me personally, I never get when people decide that they want to neg you or bullshit you for your attention, but obviously that's a sign of someone believing that they don't think that they could ever have you. So they decide that they're going to reject you or fuck you over first, I suppose. But one day, of course, or over a course of time, Max began exhibiting strange behavior and he just continued staring at Pete intensely out of nowhere. Um, so I don't know if you guys have had similar experiences like that before, where someone would just stare at you or make certain comments towards you for no reason and you have no clue what's going on. And you're just fed the fuck up. You don't know why they're being weird towards you for no clear reason. Hmm. Which would lead me to another thing that caught my attention, was the fact that Max was probably stalking and watching Pete because he obviously waited on Pete to leave the store when he was going to retrieve some things for his grandmother, and he decided that he was going to finally confront Pete for the first time in a deserted alleyway at night. Like I said, I don't know what Max was thinking or what people similar to Max are thinking when they decide to aggressively engage with you or engage with you in a creepy way. It usually doesn't give, oh, this person likes me. It usually gives serial killer vibes. Nonetheless, he decided that it was a brilliant idea to confront Pete in an alleyway, a deserted one at night. And obviously, um, I found it a little odd when his method of confronting Pete involved making it seem like, again, he had beef with Pete, he had a bone to pick with Pete, and come to find out, he had a thing for Pete the entire time. And again, the timing in which he chose to confront Pete and the way he was staring at him in a predatory way. Nonetheless, I believe that Max obviously thought that Pete should just telepathically know that Max had a crush on him the entire time. Hmm. Go fucking figure. Boy logic, I guess. And that led me to obviously be caught by um, seeing where Max decided that he was going to force how he felt on Pete by pushing him against the wall, maybe restraining him, and stealing a kiss from him. So brilliant. And rightfully so, Pete freaked out and decided that he was going to get one on Max. Like, how dare you kiss me against my will? And obviously, Max didn't like feeling ignored or rejected, so he punched Pete back. Unfortunately, Pete hit his head too hard, lost consciousness. I'm not gonna lie, when I got to the part about him losing consciousness, my mind immediately went to was Max gonna do something, a bit strange to him in a dark alleyway while he's unconscious? I guess we'll never know that part, but one thing's for sure, he obviously, like the coward he was, ran off and left Pete for dead, quote unquote, at night in the deserted alley. And that pushed me to another thing where finally we got to the point of seeing moments of compassion between Vegas and Pete. Usually it would be depicted as though Vegas was pretty cold and completely uninterested in Pete. So it was really interesting in this chapter for there to be a showcase of Vegas and Pete finally just having alone time and talking to each other as opposed to playing games with each other and acting like they don't see one another in the same room. So it showed like moments of compassion where Vegas is concerned about Pete's well being and asks what happened to him when he found him, which I still don't know how he found Pete. Was he actively stalking him too? I don't know. That would make more sense to me if that were the case. And while Vegas was expressing compassion and obviously soaking up the opportunity to talk to Pete up front, Pete's obviously unresponsive to questions Vegas was asking him about his predicament. And the few minutes he was lucid, he obviously didn't miss the opportunity to talk about or express how much, pretty much, he found Vegas to be fine shit. He thought Vegas was hot shit, and rightfully so. Vegas, I mean, Vegas is fine shit for real. But nonetheless, I enjoyed the beginning of me being aware of the interaction that highlights a contrast or a contrasting sense of care and attachment between the both of them. And of course, Pete had to lose his consciousness right when he was telling Vegas how he feels about him. Basically, telling him and complimenting him on how attractive he thought he was. Should be curious to see what's going to happen next after that. Did Vegas, I don't know, just sat there and blushed and replayed in his mind over and over again about how much Vegas is telling him how fine he thinks he is, how attractive he thinks he is. And if he is gushing over that, what does that mean for him? Does it mean that he's trying to make sense of his polarizing feelings for Pete? Does he, or is that a gateway for him to continuously explore new ways that he could exploit Pete for Pete's attention? Because, like he mentioned, Vegas has never had anyone tell him how beautiful he was before. Should be interesting. But anyway, that's my reaction, narration, and a bit of an analysis to this chapter so far. So, if you guys enjoyed this and you had similar experiences with you before, especially when dealing with people like Max or jealous individuals bullying you because you're super close and you have access to someone that they put on a pedestal, let me know. Or if you also have experience with trying your hardest to act like you don't like somebody that you obviously do. Either way, let me know in the comments and I will talk to you guys or narrate or read or analyze the next chapters with you guys the next time.